Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 19th of June. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has lashed out at United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon after the top international diplomat criticized Israel for the deaths of Palestinian children during last summer's conflict in Gaza. In a post on his Facebook page, Netanyahu wrote that this is a black day for the UN and there is no limit to its hypocrisy. He went on to accuse Ban of preferring to attack Israel rather than note that Gazan children were taken hostage by Hamas, which fired missiles from their schools at Israeli children and dug terror tunnels toward preschools in Israel. He went on to write that the UN has once again chosen to lecture Israel, which he defended as taking care to act according to the international standards as determined by a series of top generals from the US and Europe just this week. At the same time, Netanyahu said Hamas is winning immunity from the UN, even though it has been proven beyond any doubt that its terrorists committed war crimes by launching rockets from hospitals, mosques, and even the UN's own facilities. Secretary General Ban is also urging Israel to take measures to protect Palestinian children.
I'm also deeply alarmed at the suffering of so many children as a result of Israeli military operations in Gaza last year. I urge Israel to take concrete and immediate steps, including by reviewing existing policies and practices to protect and prevent the killing and maiming of children, and to respect the special protections afforded to schools and hospitals.
Turning to the arson attack on the Church of the Loaves and Fishes, and the Prime Minister has ordered law enforcement officials to aggressively bring those behind the crime to justice. Early yesterday morning, the flames gutted part of the church revered by Christians as the traditional site of Jesus' miracle of feeding 5,000 followers on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Graffiti was found spray painted on a church wall of a Hebrew prayer denouncing the worship of false gods. According to a fire brigade spokesman, the blaze was ignited at multiple places inside the limestone structure, proving that it was started deliberately. No damage was reported to the 5th century mosaic floors that have been restored in the church. Netanyahu has instructed the Shin Bet Internal Security Service to make investigation into the incident a top priority.
The government of Israel condemns in the strongest possible terms this morning's arson attack on the church. It's attack on all of us. Israel is a country where freedom of religion is one of our core values, and all have the right under the law to freely practice their faith. The Prime Minister has instructed the law enforcement community to act aggressively to bring the perpetrators of this crime to justice.
Turning to the U.S., where 21-year-old Dylan Roof is waiving extradition from North to South Carolina, where he is suspected of fatally shooting 9 people at a black church in Charleston. He was captured without resistance after a citizen spotted his car in the neighboring state nearly 4 hours away from the crime. Roof's childhood friend, Joey Meek, alerted the FBI after recognizing him in surveillance camera images wearing the same sweatshirt that he'd been wearing the last time he saw him. Meek also told authorities that the suspect used his birthday money to purchase a Glock pistol and that several weeks ago, Roof began railing about black people and remarked that he had a plan. The suspect appears in photographs holding a commemorative plate bearing the Confederate flag, wearing a jacket with flag patches from the apartheid-era South Africa and formerly white-ruled Rhodesia, which is now black-led Zimbabwe. He allegedly spent nearly an hour inside the historic Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church before opening fire and killing 6 women and 3 men, including Pastor Clementa Pinckney, who was a Democratic member of the state Senate. Minister of Culture and Sports Miri Regev was met with a silent protest upon her arrival for today's annual theater awards ceremony in Tel Aviv. Some 24 actors, entertainers, and dancers demonstrated outside the Einav Cultural Center, where they held up blank signs and had their mouths taped shut to protest what they say are the government's ongoing attempts to muzzle and mute performers. Inside, crowds booed Regev when she entered the auditorium and lashed out against her for allegedly censoring their freedom of speech and expression. Tensions have been escalated between the artistic community and Regev since she assumed office last month. She was quoted during an interview published in a local magazine yesterday, calling the world of culture an ungrateful entity filled with uptight hypocrites, many of whom she described as petty bores. IBA's Eli Wogelenter asked Jerusalem Post-Knesset reporter Lahav Harkov how the media sees the battle for freedom of speech in culture and whether the changes that the Netanyahu government is promoting, if it is promoting its own agenda, is a fair charge.
The Prime Minister said something in the Likud faction meeting on Monday. He said that, there's freedom of speech in Israel, it's anchored in the law, and nobody is questioning that. But freedom of speech doesn't mean that everything that someone says has to be funded by the government. And so that's really how you can bridge it with freedom of speech. Nobody is stopping these people from speaking, but the government can make a decision whether it wants to pay for things or not. And Miri Regev said, this government's decided not to commit suicide. We've decided not to support people who say things that are clearly not in Israel's interest and that even seek to harm Israel.
People are charging that this is another example of a right-wing government pursuing its own agenda, squashing any kind of dissenting voice. Is that a fair charge?
I think it's exaggerated. I don't see any evidence that Regev is, defunding plays and other works with left-wing messages. It's only when it gets to the point of violence, of terrorism, that she took that step and took away funds.
Muslims around the world are today celebrating the first Friday of the Ramadan Islamic Holy Month. Worshippers from across Israel and the Palestinian Authority streamed to the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem's Old City for prayers, where, according to Islamic faith, the Prophet Muhammad began his night journey to heaven. Palestinian police worked alongside Israeli border forces in an attempt to expedite the entry of West Bank residents across checkpoints into Jerusalem to reach the holy site for the special day. Police spokesman Mickey Rosenfeld said that all necessary security arrangements, including the deployment of additional units in and around the Old City, have been made to give as many Palestinians as possible the opportunity to pray at the compound during Ramadan. Junior and high school students across the nation are celebrating the official start of the summer vacation today. 700,000 attended their last day of class, and while many still have matriculation exams to study for, others are already turning their attention to summertime activities. The country's beaches began to fill up around midday after many of the students picked up their final report cards for the academic year and headed out to enjoy the sun, sand, and the surf. Elementary students will join them on the 30th of June and stay out on break until the 1st of September, when studies are scheduled to resume. Veteran Israel television journalist Uri Cohen Aronov passed away last night at the age of 64 following a serious illness. He was called Akka by those who knew him and was the chief police reporter at Israel Television Channel 1, covering the crime beat and leading security stories for nearly 3 decades. He also wrote and directed a highly praised special documentary about the Jewish community in Iran, where members were forced to officially convert to Islam in 1839, causing many to clandestinely observe Judaism and Zionism for over a century. Cohen Aronov was divorced from popular singer Ricky Gal and leaves behind 1 daughter. His funeral is scheduled to be held on Sunday afternoon at the Sanhedria Cemetery in Jerusalem. Renowned American actor Michael Douglas was awarded the 2nd annual Genesis Prize in Jerusalem last night, given in recognition of recipients' great contributions to Jewish culture around the world. Prime Minister Netanyahu presented the honor to Douglas during the special gala event that was hosted by iconic American celebrity comedian Jay Leno. Ahead of the ceremony, Douglas and his actress wife, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and their 2 children visited the Prime Minister's residence. During a panel discussion about regional peace with former President Shimon Peres, Douglas voiced his concern over the prospect of a nuclear-armed Iran, as well as efforts to isolate Israel.
I'm concerned on this boycott issue, and I don't feel comfortable with the response. And I would hope that the Knesset could come together as one and not argue and fight about individual issues the way that it happens and so self-destructive in my own country, and can see beyond that into the crisis, the external crisis that do exist, and could get a clear message that they could share with the rest of the world. Clearly, if the Middle East got into a situation where Iran continued to develop a nuclear weapon, Saudi Arabia would have a very easy option of calling up Pakistan, and we could just go on from there. And for me personally, this, to me, with all the chaos that exists in the Middle East, is my deepest and biggest concern.
I applaud you, and I think this is the most important thing, for setting an example to Jews everywhere to stand tall and stand proud. Be proud Jews.
Staying with the BDS issue, and IBA's Eli Wogelenter asked Zionist Union MK Michal Biran what the government can do to fight the Palestinian-led campaign.
As a center-left MK, the BDS is a very complicated issue. On the one side, those who enhance the BDS movement, some of them are anti-Semite, some of them are against Israel's right to exist. So we are there everywhere to fight against BDS, fight against the delegitimation of Israel and the right to exist. But on the other hand, you cannot ignore the situation. 30 years ago, all the civil rights activists around the world were friends of Israel. Now the only friends we have left with are people that are so racist that they hate Muslims more than they hate us. I have just returned from a convention of Budapest of the PES, of the social democratic parties around Europe, and it's getting to be very, very complicated to say what I proudly say, that I'm a Zionist. And the only way to treat BDS thoroughly is try and do something active, to be active and to promote the negotiation. So we can say we are doing the best we can to try and solve the conflict with the Palestinians. Without it, it's very, very difficult to fight the BDS, and we're buying time. We're holding the water, but it cannot last forever.
While government efforts can be improved to combat ongoing international attempts to boycott and isolate Israel, in the end there's really not much that can be done to tackle the phenomenon. That's the view of the director for the Center of National Security Studies at Haifa University, Professor Dan Shiftan, expressed to IBA's Efrat Batat.
It goes beyond international organizations. It goes into campuses, it goes into...
Given the rising number of challenges in the Middle East, it is becoming increasingly doubtful that U.S. President Barack Obama will invest further efforts in mediating peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians. This, according to former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Dan Kurtzer, who told IBA's Efrat Batat that time is running out for the president's administration.
It's still important to the United States. So I think the administration is trying to sort out its priorities as you go into this last year and a half of the Obama administration. Priority number one clearly is the nuclear accord with Iran, to see whether or not that's possible. But you have a number of other challenges just in this region, let alone globally, and then of course domestically in the United States. So, you know, it's hard to project whether the administration will decide to invest significantly more effort in this because of the competing priorities.
Finally, Ambassador Kurtzer, do you think that this lack of progress in negotiation will make it harder for international communities to maintain their pro-Israel stance?
Well, a topic that has come up in almost every session here in Herzliya has been the BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions efforts. I can tell you from my time on university campuses in the United States, it is not yet a crisis, but it is a growing phenomenon. And look, there are a number of factors that go into it. There are some people who are anti-Semites, there are some who are anti-Israel, and there are some who are motivated by concern over occupation and settlements. And so I don't think we can bury our heads in the sand and simply say this is all anti-Semitism or all visceral anti-Israel activity. I think it behooves Israelis and friends of Israel in the United States to try to cope with all of the factors that go into this. I know at my own university at Princeton, we've been trying to encourage positive activities, bringing Israelis and Palestinians together to work on joint projects to try to break down differences. We're not treating this simply as an anti-Israel activity, but rather trying to understand that some people are motivated by a desire to see this conflict come to an end.
In other news, almost 60 million people worldwide were forcibly uprooted by conflict and persecution at the end of last year, marking the highest ever recorded number. Officials at the United Nations Refugee Agency say that more than half of the displaced were children, and that the overall dismal situation could deteriorate even further.
Unfortunately, today, I have to announce that the number of people displaced by conflict at the end of 2014 is 59.5 million. And that means an increase of 16% in relation to last year and an increase of 60% in relation to 10 years ago. But more dramatic than this fact is the staggering acceleration we are witnessing in displacement by conflict. We don't have the capacity and essentially we don't have the resources to support all the victims of conflict around the world and to provide them with the very minimum level of protection and assistance. We are no longer able to pick up the pieces. So this is the moment for the international community to renew its commitment to the 50th UN Convention. This is the moment, first of all, for those countries that have leverage, that have influence on the parties to the different conflicts we are facing, because they support them with money or with weapons or because they have influence in the region, to come together and to put an end to this multiplication of conflicts we are witnessing.
Former New York Yankees pitcher Mariano Rivera is visiting Israel for the first time ever this week. He and his family stopped by the Jerusalem's Tower of David Museum, escorted by the New York Board of Rabbis, together with Tourism Minister Yariv Levin and former Knesset member and American expatriate Rabbi Dov Lipman. The 45-year-old athlete talked some baseball with reporters and said that while in the Holy Land, he put in a prayer for his former teammates. Lipman said that even though he's personally a fan of the Baltimore Orioles, spending time with Rivera was special because Mariano transcends team. The one-time World Series champion is the all-time saves leader in Major League history, as well as a deeply religious man of faith who says that he was overwhelmed by what he experienced during his private visit to the region.
Amazing. Amazing. The impression has been something that is breathtaking, amazing. You know, I mean, reading about, again, reading in the Bible and walking and seeing it, and being able to touch it, can't describe it.
In financial news, the shekel today ended the trading week with a mixed performance, and due to the closure of the stock market on Fridays, here's a look at the closing numbers for the week. The IBA weather team tells us we can expect partly cloudy conditions tonight, possibly accompanied by light rain in the north that may continue also along the coast tomorrow morning. We can also expect a significant drop in temperatures on Saturday. Here's the forecast at home and abroad over the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow, and I'll be back at this desk, same time, same channel, to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a great evening and Shabbat Shalom from Jerusalem.